kann eigentlich gut anknüpfen, was Viktor gerade zu TTIP, du hast es ja nur angesprochen und meinte, da gehen die Leute eher auf die Straße, weil sie...
I can follow up on what Victor just said, what he mentioned. Because people take to the streets because of TTIP because they affect them directly. I think people haven't really grasped that TTIP is a much greater dimension than just trade. It's an economic NATO, somebody called it. Then this treaty, and then there's the TTP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is directed specifically against China. My friend Norman Pech, the legal expert on international law, in the newspaper Junge Welt, he had an article about free trade and TTIP. So it's not about chickens that are treated with corn, but it's about solidifying transatlantic dominance. Our way of life and our dominance must be ensured. What Sigmar Gabriel, social democratic leader, said last year, we talk too much about chickens being in corn, but not enough about geostrategic importance. The most important reason for TTIP is the geopolitical. The rise of China and other Asian countries and the relative decline of the US and the slump in the Eurozone is an impetus for the transatlantic West to draft new economic treaties that reflect its political ideals such as liberal democracy, and TTIP is a main aspect. And 3 years ago, Stuart Eisenstadt, who's Deputy Minister of Vice, said there are two competing methods that exist since post-Soviet. One is the transatlantic system based on free trade, free peoples, and free relations. And the other is authoritarian rule and regulated economies. And TTIP is the opportunity to show that our model is the best way to handle the 21st century. Okay. Then TPP, then is with the US and the other countries surrounding the Pacific, but not China. TPP covers an area where 40% of the global economic product is generated. And the transatlantic treaties
ist eine Schlüsselfrage. TTIP, und jetzt zur NATO, TTIP kann die NATO erneuern. Es bedarf einer neuen Hierarchie, die deutlich macht, welche Länder...
And they also say TTIP can renew NATO. We need a new hierarchy. Which countries really defend the values of the Atlantic West? TTIP offers NATO a clear guideline to make this decision. TTIP is not only about free trade. Countries and societies with a trust in their one another's societies and policies. That's the first time that people start talking about economic NATO. So it's our job. This huge movement that took to the streets last weekend and unite that with the peace movement, because there's a very clear peace component. And we should emphasize that and explain to people what it's really about. And I was very irritated when TISA was not mentioned, although it's more important, really. It's all about the public services and health services and water and energy. This is the old GATT treaty, in a new form. And the important aspect of TISA, it's like TPP. The details won't be published until it's been enforced for 5 years. In Stuttgart, a demo, and a woman said in Switzerland they're talking about TISA all the time. If you look in the internet, there's a lot about TISA in other German-speaking countries, but very little from Germany. So we should watch out. And the danger of war is clearly increasing. Okay, I wanted to talk about the reasons for the flood of refugees. Okay, it's well known that it's about arms exports, but less well known is the growing environmental destruction, that the flows of migration that causes, and of course free trade agreements, such as the EPAs, the agreements that the EU has been concluding for several years with individual countries, such as the Asian Pacific countries, where the wants is to force these countries to open their markets entirely, and so be able to buy natural resources cheaply. And this will destroy their economies and kill people. As the Siegel said, as the Pope has said, this economy is killing people. We can see that in Africa. This is being renegotiated. But there's almost no discussion in public about these EPS. 2008, I wrote a brochure about it. I'm astonished what people saw there. We still use that today. It's just as current and topical. These free trade agreements hasn't been able to force all these countries to sign them. Some countries haven't, but there's still time until February of next year. The relations between the EU and the ACAP countries and the Treaty of Waterloo will expire in 2020. In my research, I found an interesting article, what practical effects these have. Milk prices are a hot topic in Germany too. And so there was a newspaper article in July about how milk powder exports from the EU. The EU exports powdered milk large amounts to Africa. The milk lakes we produce here, so they made into powdered milk at subsidized cheap prices. But so the dairy farmers there can't compete. Powdered milk from Europe costs only half as much as local milk in Burkina Faso. So all the dairy farmers are giving up because they can't compete against this cheap, subsidized powdered milk. There are many examples for this. First, the market for poultry in Africa was destroyed, and then the market for pork and then tomatoes. So there's been a real deindustrialization over the last 20 years or so in Africa. And what's the result is, well, they flee the country. They can't live from their from the land that they originally lived in, and they're starving. Okay, most of the people who are going hungry are the rural population. Which is just crazy. There were very good studies done about the topic, the forced trade liberalization. what it cost those countries. Okay, figures from 2005 from a British aid organization. If these countries had not been forced to liberalize trade, for which they got debt reduction, they would have had enough money to pay for schooling for all their children. So they said that sub-Saharan Africa, that this trade liberalization had cost them $220 million. If just leave these countries alone, let them disconnect themselves from our export economy, they would be a lot better off. This whole free trade policies should be regarded with extreme skepticism. We mustn't export all this or subsidize agricultural products and destroy the farming of other countries. And so then the people flee from those countries to us. Okay, then we saw on TV again the numbers of Africans trying to get across the Mediterranean to Lampedusa and other Italian ports. So another reason for the refugees is environmental destruction. Even we leftists have much too little understanding of what ecology and environmental destruction has with war and refugees. If we don't do something against it, we'll really suffer from it.
Mit Krieg und auch mit sozialen Bedingungen zu tun hat. Wir müssen diese ökologisch-soziale Frage zusammenbinden und wenn uns das nicht gelingt, denke ich, verlieren wir da ganz, ganz groß. Wir hatten letztes Jahr eine größere internationale Tagung am Bundestag auf der Flucht vor humanitären Krisen.
Last year we had a hearing about this in the Bundestag. Let me just quote a few lines from that. When I read that we need to publicize this a lot more. They wrote so many good things, but it's so often forgotten so quickly because there's so many other things going on. So most of it's already been said. You just have to dig it out, the old stuff again. It is assumed that in this century, another 20 years, the sea level will rise by about 1 meter. Okay, 20 the 50 largest cities are on the sea coast. Okay, if the rise of sea levels could force up to 430 million people to leave their homes. Naomi Klein, in her book about climate crisis, showed that current studies by the World Bank and the international energy agencies, they assume that current policies would result in increase of average global temperature levels will increase by 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Okay, the flow of goods growing rapidly because everybody's buying online. Apple and Amazon are building these huge warehouse centers. The flow of goods has increased really vastly. The more and more things being transported on all our roads, so the emissions of carbon dioxide are growing. And so don't do internet shopping, but go into your local store and buy there. many young people don't understand what environmental results are they have. Apart from the fact that the lots of local shops go bankrupt as well. But what's really terrifying, if you look at the data about climate change, in Jordan, one of the main countries where the refugees from Syria go, most of them are in Jordan and Lebanon. When I was a rapporteur for the Council of Europe on refugee camps in adjacent countries, but they have enough water in Jordan at the moment, but in the next couple of decades, rainfall may decrease up to 80%. That there haven't been revolts yet, rebellions. Well, Lebanon, it's not really true. So many people in such an environmentally and economically precarious situations, well, this political situation becomes more and more unstable. Okay, well, the people who are now in the islands in Greece, if they shipped them to the islands off the coast of Germany, there'd probably be a civil war here. So all the Near and Middle East is not yet exploded, but can explode at any moment. If one considers that even here, they talk about much. It said Israel certainly has 130 atom bombs, and now in the conventional papers report that the entire Near East becomes a war zone. And what happens then? Where are all the people going to flee to? The Gaza Strip, with 1.8 million people, it's simply no longer habitable with those populations. But people from the Gaza can't get out of the Gaza Strip. So I've been asking myself for a long time, what's going to happen to all those people? If there's a new war, will Israel simply start a new war and kill people as it did 2 years ago? I see there's a real danger. Israel's policy and right-wing extremism than Israel. I know that most Germans, this is a hot topic that they don't want to touch. But we threaten freedom of the press and freedom of opinion. I'm very concerned. The increasing campaigns, including threats of murder against people, journalists who publish articles that are critical of Israel. So there was a report on the problems of the water and the West Bank. That's a hydrologist whom I know personally spoke about that. And the journalist who was moderating received murder threats. Dozens and dozens of events that were Israel criticized have been canceled because of a huge campaign claiming they're anti-Semitic. Okay, a prominent German Jew, Avi Meltzer, was supposed to speak in Frankfurt, and it was canceled. And one in Munich, that the Department of Culture of the city of Munich said it could lead to criticism of Israel and anti-Semitic remarks, and so they canceled it. And they don't allow people to enter the department. the Israeli peace movement and left-wing movements are under great pressure, including threats of murder, and they don't know where they're going to get their money. Yesterday or the day before, Egypt passed a law that will just confiscate the assets of the human rights organizations. I phoned out my employee. This is going to be a blueprint for what they'll do in Israel. In several countries, we can see increasing pressure on left-wing groups, on human rights groups, because they talk about things that they don't want to hear in those countries. So I say, we must be much more concerned about this and not allow ourselves to be intimidated by claims of anti-Semitism. Because this is a clear attack against the freedom of the press and freedom of opinion, freedom of speech. Okay, I don't want to say anything much more about that then.